Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and I am going to be talking about WandaVision Episode 8. It's called Previously On. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. We ended last week with Agatha revealing herself, revealing her villainy to Wanda. And this episode takes us down a flashback, a memory lane, with Agatha looking for exactly how Wanda was able to achieve the creation of this town. We get the flashback that Agatha was a witch in olden times. I kind of like the swerve because it goes to Massachusetts and it's like, hey, we're doing a witch thing. But the swerve being that it's actually a witch who's been tried by several other witches because Agatha's just that evil that all the other witches are like, no, you're evil. Honestly, it's probably my least favorite scene in the episode because it feels like it goes on for a long time, and it kind of just boils down to there's blue energy beams, but then Agatha's are purple, and the purple's taking over the blue, and it just kind of I feel a bit, I don't know, really cheesy and simple, I guess, in a way that it probably ties back into my complaint of her kind of evil monologue voice from last episode, but. Her monologuing a bit too much aside, I did really like this episode. She's determined to know how Wanda was able to do this because she is a full witch. You know, Agatha's a full-time witch who's been trying to develop her mastery of the dark arts for centuries at this point, and she wants to know why Wanda is this good. Like, how is she this powerful? To the point where by the end of the episode, like, she was like, oh, I have to try so hard to do an illusion that's this simple. Creating, Pietro, the brother, as an illusion. It wasn't necromancy because the body was another planet, which, again, ties back into my thinking that she just pulled a face from another universe. Hence tying into the X-Men stuff. But she didn't ever really consider that Wanda literally just created and transmuted things. She didn't really consider that. She assumed it was illusions rather than she actually created matter, or at least transmuted matter into this new thing. Because obviously during this episode we get to see what the town actually looked like before all this started. And from there we go into Wanda's flashbacks, and Wanda gets to relive certain moments from her life. I actually thought they might even get Aaron Taylor Johnson to show up as Quicksilver for one of these scenes, and they didn't quite. So I guess it would have been amusing to have him then pop up in the real flashbacks, if you will. But we get a series of scenes, and I think some of these are really great. The first big one where we see Wanda as a little girl, maybe about 10 years old, something like that, and her Pietro are excited when their father gets back, and he's been selling like American DVDs of TV shows. And it's, I Love Lucy, Malcolm in the Middle. It's a lot of the shows that have been directly parodied or emulated throughout this season. And it turns out, that they learned English largely, or at least helped their English learning as a family by only talking in English when they were watching these TV shows, which they would watch in English. And Wanda's favourite show was the Dick Van Dyke Show, which, was what I think the first episode was directly emulating. And I actually kind of got a little, I won't say choked up, I don't react that much to things, but I found myself buying into the emotions of the happiness of them as a family, and the music was swelling as they're watching this silly sitcom. And of course it has the dark ending because there's an explosive goes off, there's fighting out in Markovia. This kills their parents, and they're hiding under the bed. They're scared of the Stark Enterprises or Stark Industries, bomb going off, which of course never happened. But what's funny about this is that obviously movies and TV, because they're made by people who are fans of movies and TV, sometimes fall into a trap of over-referencing and some stuff being a little too relying on other properties of the past. That happens a lot. And it makes sense why. It makes sense. I don't like it, and it's a problem when it does happen too much, but it makes sense when it does happen. Actually using the fond memories of watching TV shows like this with loved ones as an actual device is not something I think I've seen done before too much. At least not this directly, where it's been so tied into what the main character's been doing for the vast majority of the season, where the entire episodes were structured around these old sitcoms, and it was such like a core part of like who she was. Why is she formed it this way? And there's a couple of different answers in this episode. The first, of course, being that it's tied to her childhood and she has these memories. But the music was swelling up, and I thought, someone cynical could complain, insert Connor's face about here, someone cynical could complain that this is a little too cute, a little too in your face with the love of old TV shows, a little too kind of making the emotional crutch, the emotional thing, be TV itself feels a little bit. It's something you just don't do in movies and TV because it feels a little bit not self-congratulatory, but congratulatory. Thank you. Took me a minute. Not just because it feels a little bit like that, or it feels a little bit too snake eating the tail kind of thing. But I'm watching this scene, and it occurred to me that this makes a lot of sense. I mean, hell, I'm someone who goes on YouTube or on a podcast and talks about TV and movies several times a week. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about movies and TV. I grew up watching movies and TV. I have fond memories of watching certain shows and watching certain movies. If there's one emotional trigger for a character that almost everyone who cares about movies and TV should connect with, it's the fond memories of movies and TV. It makes a hell of a lot of sense. So the idea that she does see sitcoms as this ideal fantasy is because that's what she was watching as a kid. It's what the fantasy what she was looking at. It's baked into her from a young age. So that's one big reason why that has been the central premise of the show from her character's perspective, why her psyche has done it this way. And that's neat in and of itself. And I found myself really enjoying this scene because it felt like it was tapping into something that was very relatable as someone who loves movies and TV. That this was something that she retreats to, that when things get tough, she then goes to movies, she goes to TVs, and specifically in this case, TV sitcoms, and loses herself in them and fantasizes about being part of them, or fantasizes about just that being the perfect world, because it takes away from the real world pain that she's actually having to deal with. And I think a lot of us have done that. I think I've certainly done that, especially when I was younger. You lose yourself in the fictional stuff because real world is scary. And watching a world where it's heroes and villains, or even just hijinksy families, can be a lot more appealing. So that really spoke to me in a weird way. And then, we have a scene with her in the Hydra test labs or wherever this is. And when she first encounters the scepter, the Loki scepter with the stone in it. And she comes in, and they make a point of saying that everyone else who they've done this to has died. That no one has survived, but she does. Which immediately suggests that there's something already kind of special about her. And Agatha's already kind of implied that about the bomb not going off, that she might have actually had something to do with the bomb not going off. But, which also leads to the idea that, well, once this happened with her, maybe that's why they shoved her brother in there. Thought, oh, well, maybe it's genetic, shove him in there. And he clearly survived too, because he had powers. And he was on Age of Ultron. So, that's interesting, just from a wider universe thing, where we're thinking about the X gene, we're thinking about mutants. Was she technically already a mutant that was just unlocked, or just locked up, and the stone just simply unlocked her potential rather than gave her the powers outright? And something that I think Agatha even says, was this something that would have just slipped through the cracks and would never have rose to the surface had it not been for the encounter with the scepter? That's kind of interesting, and the idea of bringing X-Men into this world, and the idea that there are mutants. And even I joked about Wanda potentially creating mutants. The idea that she, Agatha says to her this episode, you achieved outright creation, which witches have been trying to do for so long, and you're a myth. I mean, we end the episode with her saying, you're the Scarlet Witch, as if it's like a title, as if it is a meaningful thing. A little bit cheesy, but she's finally said it. It's a good cliffhanger to go out on. It's fine. I don't really like the idea, of course, that she's this chosen one, this special actual witch per se. I prefer it to be the X gene, to be the mutant gene. But I like the idea that Agatha, a devout witch, and a very powerful witch at that, has almost misinterpreted this as being the chosen one, the Red Queen, or the Red Queen, the the Red Queen. That's a Resident Evil movie thing. I'm disgusted myself. I hate those movies. But the Scarlet Witch, right? The Scarlet Witch is this thing, this prophecy, and maybe that's where the name comes from, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I do like the idea that she's mistaking this as being something more meaningful in a sort of prophecy style way, or in a sort of divine, like chosen one kind of way, when in reality she is a really powerful mutant, which I'm sure, I don't expect them to say that next episode. I suspect that's something that we might come back and fill in and sort of further establish and correct when we actually are dealing with mutants down the line, and we're dealing with other mutants. Assuming, of course, that Wanda herself doesn't unlock the mutant potential, because maybe it's not that she creates mutants, maybe she just realizes that this power that's in her, there's a potential for millions of people to have powers inside them that are unlocked, or that are locked up, and she's going to unlock the she's going to break the shackles and say, mutants, be free, kind of thing. And maybe that's how we get mutants. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen next episode, because as much as it's fun to theorize that this is leading to the mutants in the MCU, none of the movies they've announced for the next several years are mutant stuff. So it's actually a bit too forward thinking to be thinking we're doing that right now. But it's fun to speculate. It's fun to think about things that they might come back to later in that capacity. So anyway, yeah, so she gets powers. She's watching sitcoms again in her room at this facility, and then again we see her with Vision, and this is sort of circa Civil War, maybe just before Civil War, where her and Vision are starting to bond, and he comes into the room and she's watching Malcolm in the Middle. And there's a couple of lines of dialogue here that I thought were really good in different ways. The one was that early on in the scene, Bryan Cranston, like the porch collapses on him. He's like doing stuff on the porch, and the overhead collapses on him. And Vision's trying to understand why it's funny. He's like, to understand this is funny because of the great pain and the injury that he sustained. And Wanda tries to explain that that's not the case. And when he says, but isn't he hurt? He says, no, it's not that kind of show. I thought that answer, no, it's not that kind of show, felt really impactful to me. I think, one, because it makes sense that that's why the world she's been trying to live in is a sitcom, because a sitcom, and there's some rare exceptions, sure, but for the most part, yes, she's right. It's not that kind of show. People don't get seriously hurt. They might be in the situations that should seriously hurt them, but they won't actually be. There's a little bit of cartoon logic to make sure they're okay. There's never any dire consequences in a sitcom. And the desire to live in one from her makes a lot of sense in that way, because everyone she's ever loved has died. There's always been these dire consequences to everything in her life. So here, she's in a world where there is nothing like that. It's not that kind of show. I like that. So I thought that was really good. And then the other line here that's really great is when he's trying to help her get over her brother. He has a line where he says, "What is grief if not love persevering?" And that's a wonderful line of dialogue. It's very beautiful, it's very poignant. She clearly takes that in, the idea that, it's just a sentiment that's often shared when we're talking about death and movies and TV. We always talk about, the person lives on through our love for them, and so on and so on. That's basically all he's saying, but he says it very succinctly in a very simple sentence, but it's very elegant, in a way that a creature who's only just recently achieved sentience, and a creature who's still understanding humanity and all these things, it could only be put so elegantly and succinctly by that type of person, I think, by this type of life. It's a very keen observation, but I really like that line of dialogue. I thought that was kind of touching. So yeah, these scenes I thought were great. The performances of both actors were wonderful. If anything, I actually think, I like Han in the show. Catherine Han in the show is pretty good for the most part. I do think there was a little bit too much of the evil monologuing going on, which just comes off a bit more hokey throughout this episode. So I don't know if I needed her to explain the point of each flashback at the end of each flashback. She kept coming out then and going, oh, so this is this, and this means this and this shelter. Oh, and this is where you got your powers, but that doesn't explain why you did this powerful thing, kind of thing. So it leads to the big scene, where we saw, of course, what turned out to be a doctored or highly edited piece of security footage that looked like Wanda stole Vision's body from Sword. Turns out that's not the case. Hayward lied. Wanda did go to Sword, demanded to see Vision, was mortified when she saw the body. Hayward's a complete dick about it. She does break the window, she does go down, and another good line actually in moment in the episode is when she says, I don't feel anything from him, or I don't feel anything from these body parts. And she leaves, and it's it's a heartbreaking little scene. But when she gets back in the car, there's an envelope that's been opened, and it's clearly something that Vision's left for her, or something that Vision had got for her that she's found after his death. And she's heartbroken, of course, because one of the things she mentions is that she came back after this 5-year gap, and he just wasn't there, because obviously his body had long been moved, because she just appeared where she'd been. And it's this map, it's this heart saying, growing, where we can grow old together, and it's this lot of land in Westview, and I really noticed actually one of the storefronts in Westview when she's driving through it, and it's they're just the real version of Westview, and we see some of the various characters that we've seen in the TV shows, guy with a mustache and whoever else. And I noticed one of the storefronts, it said Westview, but the T in West and then the V in View look like they were really emphasized to say TV, and I thought it was a neat little touch, given the themes of the show. But she she gets to the plot of land, and it's kind of a mess, it's kind of a dump, but she cries out in pain and creates the Westview for episode 1. And the big thing here, of course, is that she then creates Vision with energy, seemingly like she probably created the boys. What's interesting here is obviously this one clarifies that she did not steal Vision's body, that Vision's corpse is not literally walking around. More on that in the post-credit scene, of course. But I did note as well that the energy that was coming out of her to make it was yellow. It wasn't the usual red, which perhaps implies that she'd actually absorbed some of the Mind Stone. It's or something, and so there is actually some of the Mind Stone's energy get into this creation of Vision. Combined, and this is the other thing that made me like that line from earlier on, the what is grief if not love persevering. The idea that she was able to build a Vision out of her love for him, that is fairly accurate, to the point where the Vision is self-aware and is trying to save the people in the town from Wanda potentially, and that is kind of beautiful in a weird way. But it does lead to the question of what exactly is he then? Is he just that? Is there a little bit of the real Vision in there, based on her memory of him? And then it leads, of course, to the mid-credit scene, which is the actual Vision body has been rebuilt and reformed into White Vision, which is a thing from the comics, which I didn't really know about. I saw this after I watched the episode. I saw the covers and the things. And they turn this Vision on, who moves and doesn't look like he has the soul, doesn't look like he has the personality of Vision. He looks like more robotic, I guess, from the quick glimpse we get of him. This is probably the most obvious thing to suggest might happen, but it kind of feels like the outcome of this might potentially, for the Wanda created Vision that might have some real Mind Stone energy in him, created by love, but the real, partly at least, has some real personality in him, will merge with the White Vision robot body to give his Vision back. Basically. It won't necessarily be exactly the Vision we had before, but it'll be based on that Vision, and then he'll have a body that he can walk out of the Hex in, and that's maybe the happiest possible. Vision gets to be around, and Paul Bettany keeps his job. Potential. That is the obvious thing to suggest. Will they go down that route? I don't know. Sometimes Marvel, they do go down the obvious route because it's the one that's the most satisfying, it's the one that makes sense. Sometimes they like to swerve us a little bit. I don't know what they're going to do with this, but that is definitely the first thought I had. We don't see any other characters in this episode. There's no Monica. I was actually expecting the mid-credit scene, because we hadn't seen any other characters. No matter who it was going to cut to, whether it be Vision and the Hex, whether it be Monica, whether it be Darcy, whether it be Hayward. Turned out to be Hayward, which led to White Vision, but we didn't see any of them, so it was primed for a mid-credit scene because there was so many characters we could jump to that we hadn't seen this episode. So that's your big cliffhanger for next week, and then of course the threatening to kill the two kids with the purple energy leashes, and Wanda getting ready to fight and being called Scarlet Witch finally. And we knew they were going to use that title by the end of the show. It coming from an actual witch who sees Wanda as like the most powerful witch that ever existed, but clearly doesn't understand her powers and doesn't understand the potential of what she can do with them, is kind of interesting. And maybe it'd be interesting to define, especially if we're getting to Doctor Strange 2 from this. Like, okay, there is some actual witch powers in her, but I suspect it will in some way link to the mutant gene in some way. I don't know. There's so much going on, potential with this, and because she is a mutant in the comics, and because we know the mutants are coming, it makes sense to eventually somehow connect her to the mutants. It's just whether or not they even hint at that just now or anytime soon. But they have to know, right? Feige has to know that all we're going to be guessing every single turn of the way with this Wanda stuff is that it somehow links to the mutant gene and somehow links to the mutants that are eventually going to come. He has to know we're going to be thinking that constantly. So he knows what he's doing. he knows he's prodding at us. He knows he's making us think these things. It's just a case of where does he ultimately want to go with it. So we'll see. But it was a damn interesting episode. It was the longest episode yet, actually. Admittedly, if you take out all the monologuing from Agatha, it would probably be more like a typical length episode. But there was 2 or 3 really standout scenes. Her going to see Vision's body, her with the Vision watching Malcolm in the Middle, and the 2 kids watching the DVDs with their parents and the aftermath of that. Those 3 scenes are 3 of the best scenes of the show so far, and there's a lot of emotional weight in this episode. So I'm excited to see how they wrap it up. There's a lot to potentially wrap up, though. I'm probably more concerned than ever that they're going fairly heavy on like open threads for future shows and movies, because I mean, we have to deal with Agatha. We have to deal with a potential, like, we've got, White Vision now with Hex Vision. I think all signs lead to there being a big cameo of some kind in the final episode. Is that something that just ties into all this? There's so much. I mean, maybe Doctor Strange is the really obvious one. He'd be the most obvious person to show up, given where we know this is leading. Like, it'd be the mid-credits stinger, right? It'd be Doctor Strange showing up and say, "Hey, Wanda, we should talk." Dun dun dun. That makes some sense. But hey, so we'll find out. I'm looking forward to the finale, see what it's like. And then we got Falcon Winter Soldier starting pretty much like a week later, I think. Maybe 2 weeks later. So we'll see how that is. That's only 6 episodes though, but I think there's 6 longer episodes. I damn well hope they are, because if it's 6 30-minute episodes, we're going to be feeling a little shortchanged, I think. But hey, that's WandaVision episode 8. Hopefully you enjoyed it like I did. Not without some faults, admittedly, but just good stuff. I think they're really doing a good job of building Wanda up and giving her the time that she deserves to get, because she never got a movie. She was introduced as a fairly, minor character in Age of Ultron. And when I say minor, I mean minor in the sense that she, in screen time she gets not a lot. There's so many characters to juggle that, and she's not obviously one of the main Avengers cast in that movie, so she's relatively low down the list. And she gets maybe a bit more of a role in Civil War. She's around in Infinity War, but this is really her chance to shine here and really actually explore a character. So hopefully this leads to more stuff for her. Obviously, she's going to Doctor Strange. Feige's been very cagey about the possibility of a season 2 of this particular show, although he has hinted that some of the shows already have season 2s kind of planned. Maybe this, I mean, if this makes her such a big deal that we end up with just a Scarlet Witch movie or something like after the next batch of movies, and cool. It would be a shame to never give her this focus again, though, given that we're really delving into her head and I think inherently a lot of people, myself included, are a lot more invested in her character now because of this devotion to her. And don't get me wrong, it's not the best example of this type of story. Mr. Robot did a lot of episodes, but he had a couple of big prominent episodes that were probably not unlike the core ideas of this episode. And Mr. Robot's one of the best written shows of all time. So comparisons should not be constantly made to other things. Comparing this to Twin Peaks early on, again, is only going to do it a disservice because Twin Peaks is one of the best things that's ever been made. But that said, acknowledging there's inspirations and influences and isn't a bad thing in and of itself. So hey, anyway, there you go. That's WandaVision episode 8. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Do like and subscribe. It is super important on YouTube. It is the way YouTube gauges success and will help spread us out to more people on the search results and the home pages and the recommendations, all that stuff. So please do hit those like buttons and comment. And of course, you can support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and help keep all the content coming. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?